All right, hello. Welcome to the Your Coach podcast. I'm here with Alex Hutchinson. Super exciting to have Alex here. Alex is a very important person in the running world. Has touches a lot of things, a lot of yeah. You were gonna say something?
No, I was just flattered by your generous. I love to be a VIP. So thanks,
Yeah,
John, and
yeah,
thanks
no,
for having me
definitely.
here.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Like I think yeah, no, you're the way that you bring science to the people with all your articles and stuff, I think is really important, and a lot of people know who you are, I think. So that's that I think is what I mean by that. Yeah.
And we've been interacting for what would it be like 30 years now or something like that. We were racing in university at the same time, I think, and we've
Yeah, I think I'm a bit younger than you. But yeah, like I think I don't know that we
not that
crossed
much
paths in
longer.
well, did I don't think we crossed paths in high school though. Or maybe because
No,
I
I
was at
think
St.
maybe
Mike's
it
and you're at
was maybe we just you
UTS.
yeah maybe it was maybe we just missed each other. But yeah, I do
Yeah.
remember crashing on your floor or on your in your apartment when my first book came out. I came to Montreal
Oh,
and you
okay.
helped organize a talk at Boutique Endurance,
Yeah.
and I crashed on the floor. So I appreciate that. So we've been chatting about the big issues in running for a long time, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So I will start with I just kind of ask everybody a couple of questions that are pretty similar. So just the first question is how did you get into running?
Yeah, I mean, running kind of chose me as a kid. I one of my earliest memories is in kindergarten, winning the race across the gym and thinking, "Wow, I beat the big kid. I beat Stephen Mills. How did that happen?" And so I ran, not in any serious way, but I ran for my elementary school's cross country team
Uh-huh.
and did well in those races. So began to identify as a guy who could be good. And in high school, I eventually joined a track club. May,
Mhm.
there's a quirk in Ontario, at least there was. I don't know if it still exists, where the the uh, the you're in school based on what calendar year you were born in, but the
Mhm.
the levels of competition were based on September 1st to September 1st. So if you were born
Yeah.
after September 1st, you could
So you
compete.
were a double midget,
A double
is what
midget,
you're about
yeah.
to
So I
say.
could I
Yeah,
could compete
that
with the
was the
people a year
term.
younger than me,
Yeah.
and so in my double year midget,
Uh-huh.
I did pretty well in cross country. I was 23rd at the Ontario High School Cross Country Championships, and I thought that's pretty
That's
good. And I'm
that is
only going
pretty
to be
good.
double year midget this one time, to be able
Hmm.
to compete with the grade nines when I'm a year older. So I
Yeah.
joined a track club that December,
Hmm.
and the plan was just to join it for 6 months to take advantage of this quirk in birthdays.
Hmm.
But I did really well that year in
Hmm.
track, and so initially my love affair with running was that I won races, and so that was fun.
Hmm.
And event, not to tell the whole story of my life here, but eventually after university, I had an injury, quite a bad injury that kept me out of running for 18 months or something like that. And
Okay.
it was at that point that I realized, actually, I miss running. Not just, even if I don't
Hmm.
get to go back to winning races, I hope I can go back to running. And so that was I finally realized that I had over the course of those years of training,
Hmm.
decided that I really liked running.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I mean that it's a pretty similar story, I think, to a lot of people. I mean, not everybody gets to win, but I think you you feel good, you have success, and then you want to keep going, and then yeah, and then you get it taken away, and then you're like, wait a minute, I like that.
Yeah, there was something more to
Yeah.
it than just the plastic trophies or whatever the ribbons. That there's something deeper there than in running.
Yeah. So the other kind of stock question is, and this is a big question, obviously you can go kind of anywhere you want with it, but what do you think runners need to do to run fast?
That is a big question. So I would say don't spend too much time reading articles by people like Alex Hutchinson about the latest, the latest training technique of the Norwegians or the latest supplement that elite athletes are working.
So
That,
not double thresholds, not bar
well,
chart. No.
yeah, I mean, you can do double thresholds if you want, but I think, but yeah, no, to answer the question seriously, I think the basics are very simple, which doesn't mean they're easy, but consistency and look, we could spend 9 hours discussing the like, what's the right balance of mileage, or do you need to go fast and slow and hard and easy and stuff. But ultimately, there's some pretty straightforward principles that most serious runners around the world adhere to, that involve trying to get the balance of running as much as you can while still recovering, and doing some running as fast as you can while still recovering. And if you can stick with that over a long period of time, so having a long time horizon and not being like, oh, my friend signed up for a race in 6 weeks and I'm going to sign up too, and hopefully I can get fast in 6 weeks, then I think that's what ultimately gets people fast. And so I've been in I've been in training groups, of with very good runners, talented runners, where we and motivated runners, and it starts to get into these debates about like, shouldn't we be taking like 2 minutes rest between these 1,000 meter reps instead of two and a half?
Yeah.
And I've been in training groups which have essentially fallen apart over these sorts of debates, that we don't have the right thing. We should be training Canova style. We should be doing this.
Mm.
And it's like, I find that incredibly sad when it's like, actually, what's really important is that we have each other to train with. And if you
Yeah.
don't think the workout's hard enough, you should run faster at the end of the workout. And if you think it's long enough, you should do a longer warm up. And like,
Yeah.
there's all these knobs and levers people can turn, but most of them are not connected to anything of any substance. You're just spinning the levers without changing anything fundamental. The important thing is stressing your body to the point that as hard as you can, while still allowing yourself to recover for the next opportunity to stress the body. How's that for a vague and sort of meandering answer?
No, that's great. That's great. I came up with a kind of like runner's cone or whatever of like run more, mostly easy, rest up. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
within that, you have everything. Like run more doesn't mean run forever. It just means run a little bit more. Mostly easy doesn't mean only easy. It means you have to run not easy. And the rest part you need to, have space between and things like that. And you can include if you want, like in the rest up, like, sleeping and eating and strength training even. And that's sort of my little like, saying that like it encompasses all in a way.
Michael Joyner has a haiku. I feel like I should
Yeah.
Google it right now because it hits
Yeah.
some of the same
He
note.
stole it from me. I thought of it first. I know
Okay, all
I
right.
saw that and I was like, hey,
Yeah, so his haiku is something like, run a lot of miles, some faster than your race pace, rest once in a while. So it's like,
yeah, there
yeah,
you go.
you got to run a lot. Sometimes it's got to go fast, and you got to rest. Like
Yeah.
that's so I think you're on the money with that.
Yeah. Cool. And so is Michael Joyner. Good job, Michael Joyner.
Yeah, yeah, he could learn a
He's
few things. Yeah.
well, Michael Joyner is I guess a researcher and a writer. He wrote a book. He wrote the book about at least the 2 hour running book, among other many
No,
things.
no, no.
But
He
oh,
no, he
that's
didn't
not
write
him.
that book, but he was quoted in it.
Okay, he was
So
quoted in it.
he's
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
Mayo Clinic.
yeah.
He's actually an anesthesiologist.
Okay,
But
who
so
likes
so
running?
the 2 hour marathon relation is he wrote a paper back in
Hmm.
it was published in 1991, where he was like, well, let's see. If here's how we calculate how fast someone can run a marathon based on VO2 max and
Hmm.
running economy and lactate threshold. If
Hmm.
if we took the best values that anyone has had for each of those three parameters, how fast would someone run a marathon? He's like, hey, hang
Yeah.
on, they should be able to run a marathon in like 1:58.
Hmm.
So he gets kind of credit as the
Okay.
sort of the person just planting the seed that, you know what,
Hmm.
actually maybe people can run a sub 2 hour marathon. And back then, the record was 2:06. That seemed like a bit of a
Yeah.
crazy um, topic. But he's a very creative thinker, a big integrator of ideas, and so that sort of the
Hmm.
training haiku,
Yeah.
I think is an example of that.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate it for sure. Um, okay, so here's another question that's kind of around this, and it's again kind of the stock question is what's your favorite workout? So what's the workout like if that you really love, you're like, if this is the workout tonight, like you're yes, this is my jam.
Yeah, it's changed over the years. When I was a young man, many moons ago, I think it would have been 600-meter reps.
Okay.
Um, that was just like, I was a miler, so um, I liked to go fast, but not too fast. And so 600 was just right in that sweet spot where it was like, you had to go fast in a 600, but you also had to hang on long enough that it was long enough to punish the sprinters, but short enough to get away from the marathoners. So that was the kind of workout where I could excel. Um,
Nice.
These days, I'm an older and wiser man, and 600s seem like intolerably short. I actually really like tempo runs
Yeah.
these days, or threshold workouts. I've always
Hmm.
maybe even more. I don't do much of them these days just because of the group I happen to work out with, but
Hmm.
I was always a big fan of progression runs.
Hmm. Those are
And
fun.
there's that because I just don't psychologically or whether it's physiologically, I don't love starting fast these days. It takes me a while to
Mhm.
get into my groove.
Yeah.
So I just love the idea of gradually squeezing it down. There was
Hmm.
at one point in my life, I lived in the U.S. and I lived in the Washington, D.C. area, and there's some very long canal towpaths in that
Hmm.
area where every half mile is marked.
Yeah.
And we would go out and do, a 16-mile run where the first half would be, well, sometimes it would be steady for the first half, and then the second half, like get 10 seconds per mile faster each. And there was just something super satisfying about like, yeah, okay, we're
Hmm.
tightening the vice by a half turn.
Yeah.
Every time we see one of these mile markers. So anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
those I love those. I think they're I more generally I've found every time I've changed training groups, whatever the new workout is, whatever the workout I haven't been doing before, always feels like, this is what I've been missing. This is the magic workout.
Yeah. The magic workout. What about races like not so maybe I mean you mentioned being a miler or 1500 runner when you were young and longer now, like not so much race distance, but maybe like race event or a race that you've done that's like this was a really cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, right now, uh, I really am enjoying cross country
Mm.
as a sort of throwback to the idea of it's just a race. Like from long before,
Hmm.
when I was a kid, even if I was running on the track,
Hmm.
I didn't have like super preset expectations of like this is what every 200 should be and this is exactly how
Right.
fast I should run. It was just like, oh, the gun goes, let's see what happens, let's see who's out here. There's a sort of unknowability to it, which you lose as you get more into the sport and you start to have
Hmm.
expectations. Cross country brings back some of that unknowability because every course is different. You don't even
Hmm.
know. In Canada, at least, you don't worry about exactly how long the course is. You're not stressed about. You're not wheeling the course with your measuring wheel beforehand to find out if the splits are accurate. So I enjoy that. Sort of over the span of different things I've tried, there's something very satisfying about mountain running, which I know you've done too, John.
Hmm.
I love the internal logic of like, hey, look, see that peak over there? Let's see who can get to the top fastest.
Yeah.
That feels very primal,
Yeah.
very like you don't have to explain the rules. It's just like there's the peak. Let's see who can get up first.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very satisfying too, because when you get to the top, you get to the top and then you can see and you can, in most races, it's a loop or it's in a city point to point, you don't see the start line. Or if it's a track, you've just gone around and, finished where you started. But there you look down and you're like, I was there and now
Yeah.
I am here.
If you want running to be a metaphor for life, then mountain running is a very satisfying version of that metaphor.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure. Mountain running is awesome. Um, so yeah, so you're still trading racing and you mentioned having like a bit of an injury there. Was that sort of the point where it like I don't know that where things shifted because you've talked about your sort of previous self and current self. So what is the dividing line between those two things?
Yeah, so the injury I mentioned was when I was, I guess, 21, I got that injury.
Okay.
And I was in my first year of grad school. And at that point, I had still had very high aspirations. I wanted to conquer the world, and I had a tough decision to make after that, which was, do I want to try, coming back after 18 months off, and then also not being sure that my knee was going to hold up, so not being able to just jump back in, but having to train at a kind of a not doing as much mileage as I would have liked to. So, but I did end up deciding, okay, I'm going to go for it, and running is going to be the most important thing in my life and I'm going to get back to that. And I never really got back to the level that I'd been at before the injury, but
Mm.
I tried really hard.
Mm.
And then when I was, how old would I have been? 28.
Mm.
Um, that was 2004. So I was kind of centering my dreams around the 2004 Olympic trials. Not because I had any like realistic shot of making it, but I mean, I had dreams, but um, it seemed like a natural like this I'll try until then, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And a few months before the Olympic trials, I got a stress fracture in my lower back, in my sacrum,
Oh.
in the middle of a race, actually, which I then
Oh.
finished, which wasn't smart. So I ended up having to take off, like, what was it? Basically, t 10 weeks off running
Hmm.
and starting jogging again like 3 weeks before the Olympic trials. So I went and I ran the Olympic trials just as a sort of like, this is the
Hmm.
end of this chapter of my life.
Hmm.
And at that point, I then left physics and went to journalism school like a month later. So there was a lot of change
Okay.
going on. And so
Huh.
so I was like, I was just switching careers and I was also like, all right, I gave my shot to running.
Yeah.
And now I'm done. Like I'm only going to run if I want to run. And
Hmm.
so for that next year while I was in journalism school, I ran probably once or twice a week. I would meet a couple friends at the Central Park Reservoir. I was going to school in New York, and we would run 2 laps around the reservoir, which takes about 10 minutes as a tempo run, and then jog
Hmm.
home. Um, and so, and my, what I decided was that maybe I'll train hard again, maybe I'll race again, but it'll only because I want to, not because I've been sort of feeling compelled to, like I had been for the last, 13 years of my life or whatever.
Were
And
you
so
compelled mostly internally, or was there an external
oh yeah,
compulsion that was going on?
internally, the voices, the demons or
Huh.
whatever,
Okay.
Um, so so I walked away from running in that and decided to see if I was going to come back. And I honestly did not know. Although yeah, as I said, I was running once or twice a week. And then the next year I moved to Ottawa and I started running a few times a week. And there's probably a lot of different ways we could tell this story, but at that point I was starting to date a woman who is now my wife, who is a runner, who was
Hmm.
going to school in London, Ontario. And so I would go down there for the weekend sometimes and run with her. And I'd had a lot of fitness that had built up over the years that was sort of gradually fading away as I didn't train. And so I was able to run with her, but as time went on, it was getting harder and harder to run with her. And I
Yeah.
started noticing that we would get in fights while we were running. And I sort of
Oh,
did a little
geez.
honest self-diagnosis, and I realized, yeah, it's because I'm subconsciously frustrated that I'm struggling so hard to try and keep up with her. So then I was like, I got to get in shape so we can enjoy our time running together instead of getting into fights because I'm feeling inadequate. So
You know what's funny about that is I'm pretty sure your wife beat me in a race, and it was at the beaches in Toronto. It was this like hair of the dog run or something, and like so usually in a road race, like a guy is the first overall, whatever. But she was quite good, and I was whatever, and so she won. And the people at the Balmy Beach Club were not sure what to do about this because the overall winner trophy was this big trophy, and then the women's trophy was not, but it was like the men's trophy and the women's trophy, and it was kind of like like the bigger trophy, like it should go to her, but like anyway, I don't know. It was also the hair of the dog race. There was peach schnapps at the turnaround, like it was
oh
not
my
like a
God.
big serious thing, but anyway,
It does illustrate the complex layers of assumptions about who should be doing what, which I was feeling at the time
yeah,
too. And so I
yeah.
started training a little harder. And towards the end of that year when she was in London, we both ran a 5K and it was an out and back race. And I
Hmm.
had started doing some workouts again and so I thought I was pretty fit. And we got out we at the turnaround to the two
Yeah.
and a half K into the race, we turned around and I was leading the race. I was like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Lord's right behind me.
Yeah.
And so I've never run more scared for the last 2.5K of a race, and I just barely held her off. But all of it, and that anyway, then I moved back to Toronto where I had a lot of friends that I used to train with. So I started just from a social perspective as a freelance journalist living at home, like talking to nobody for days at a time. I'd go out to workouts with these guys and
Yeah.
ended up uh, getting into what I think is a pretty healthy relationship with running, where I enjoyed pushing myself and enjoyed racing sometimes when the spirit moves me,
Mm.
but it's really for the joy of it and not because I'm trying to uh, pin my whole self-worth on it, which I probably was trying to do when I was younger. So yeah, I had
Mm.
that break away from it, and then coming back to it for a variety of reasons, kind of reframed my relationship to it, and it's been kind of that way, through various ebbs and flows ever since.
Mm. And you mentioned in that story there just that you went from physics to journalism. So what precipitated that change?
Yeah, and that's another kind of story that can be told many ways, and don't necessarily know which is the true one. One thing I say somewhat glibly, but with a kernel of truth, is that physics is really hard. And so,
Mm.
I honestly went to work every day. So I did a PhD in physics, and then I was spent a few years doing a postdoc in the States, and in my postdoc was in quantum computing, and I would go to work and it's like people have imposter syndrome. I definitely had imposter, like someone's going to discover that I don't understand a word of what we're talking about here,
But doesn't no nobody understands quantum physics though? Isn't that the whole
It's true. And
point?
in fact, I think it was like Richard Feynman, who's a Nobel Prize winner, is
Yeah.
like, you know, nobody really understands quantum. And Einstein said,
Yeah.
"Don't worry about your problems." Like everyone.
Yeah.
So it's not that I was necessarily unique in that, but it is really hard.
Mm,
And but honestly, the probably a more real explanation is it just wasn't my passion. Like so,
mm,
I would when I was doing this postdoc, like the culture in the States in U.S. physics labs is like long hours. You work pretty hard. So
mm,
I might be in the lab for 16 hours or something, having left for 2 hours to do a workout in the middle. And
mm,
then, I'd go home, sleep, come back into the lab the next morning. And I remember one morning, someone, one of my colleagues saying, "Hey, Alex, did you see this article about such and such a thing in Physics Today?" And I was like, did I see the article in Physics Today? I was in the lab for 16 hours. When I went home, do you think I was looking at Physics Today? I don't subscribe to Physics Today. But I had this sort of epiphany of like, oh,
Oh,
these guys
yeah.
spend 16 hours in the lab, then they go home and they're like, oh, I wonder what if the new physics today is here. They had a
Yeah.
passion for it. That I
Yeah.
enjoyed physics. It's like it's really like it's fascinating and it's
Hmm.
it's a fun challenge, an intellectual challenge. But it wasn't my passion. And so that was one of the signs to me. It's like I want to find something where like I go home and I want to read more about it. So I was trying to think, well, what are the things I find really like that I can't get enough of? And
Hmm.
running was one of them, and travel and music. And I thought, what
Hmm.
kind of career could involve like running and travel and music and things like that. Well, not many, but
Uh-huh.
uh, but I thought journalism might be one of them. So I decided to kind of uh, take a leap, and so I was 28, and I just decided I'd go to do a 1 year program in journalism and see what happened.
Yeah. That's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to realize that the thing you're doing is not your passion. Like I think there are probably a lot of people out there in the world who are doing a thing and it's not their passion, but they're like, well, what else am I going to do? I just did a PhD in this or even an undergrad or I'm here, I have a job. Like it how like do you think that I don't know what was it that you think allowed you to be able to take that leap? Because that's not normal. I mean that in a good way, but it's not, right? It's not the
Yeah, yeah,
typical
and I mean, there's
thing.
different ways of approaching life, right? Like
Hmm.
some people, they have jobs and they've never asked for their job to be their passion, right? They'll work 9 to 5, and then they've got their weekends and evenings and summer vacations and all that to pursue their passions, and that's definitely one way of doing it. The other way is to try and find something, the cliche of like, oh, if you work on your passion, you'll never work another day. But the, the
Yeah.
the flip side is you'll never have a day off either because
Yeah.
you're always thinking about the things that are related to work.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's a right answer for that, but I decided that I wanted to give it a shot. What allowed me to do it? I mean, I think probably a really important factor is that I have really supportive parents, and so
Mm.
I kind of knew that it's like if I faceplant here in the journalism thing, I'm not going to be like picking scraps out of the garbage to survive. I can always
Right.
move home. And like, I did
Mhm.
that after my PhD. I was between
Mm.
my PhD and my postdoc. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I moved back with my parents for a year and they were like, okay,
Mm.
take your time. You like, think about what you want to do.
Mm.
So I had a fallback plan, which is, or
Mhm.
I had a sense of security that,
Mm.
and that's, I think when we talk about like taking risks,
Mhm.
choosing to explore,
Mhm.
um, really big part of it is feeling that you have a solid basis to explore from, a place to come back to.
Mm.
And yeah, I think I don't know. I guess I'm a bit of a romantic. I like the idea of being on a having a goal to shoot towards. And in physics, I just didn't feel like I did not feel like I had the ability to be Einstein or like
Mm.
it was never a realistic thing for me to think I was going to change the course of physics. Not that I'm changing the course of anything else, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like in running, I wanted to there's a this is a bit of a digression, but when I was trying to figure out what the heck I wanted to do, my brother, as a sort of joke, gave me for Christmas a book called The Stars Are Not Enough, which was someone's PhD thesis on physics career trajectories.
Oh
And
wow.
it ended up being it was like a sociological study of like what happens to people in physics, which ones who's happy and who's not, and so on.
Huh.
And but one of the concepts that it talked about was the idea that some professions have a pantheon and some don't. So in some professions, there's like,
Mm.
if you're a physicist, you're like, I wish I could be like Albert Einstein or, Fermi or Schrodinger or whatever. If you're a
Mm.
runner, you're like, I want to be Henry Rono or
Hmm.
Jakob Ingebrigtsen or whatever. If you're an accountant, you're not like, I want to be like that guy who really kept the books really well. And no disrespect to accountants, but it's a
Yeah.
different mindset of like
Yeah.
you're trying to do your job well. You're not aspiring to be to climb the mountaintop. And so I didn't running filled that place in my life for a long time. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that leaving running and switching careers happened at the same time, and I needed something else where I could dream of like I want of climbing that mountaintop. And journalism has that sense of like there,
Yeah.
and it felt more attainable to me of like there's something I can be working towards, which is to be a columnist at Runner's World or something like
Right,
that. That
right.
would
So
be
who's
amazing.
in your journalism pantheon?
Yeah, that's changed over the years. I mean, these days I look at people like David Epstein who have
Mm.
forged a path that is like whatever he does, I'm trying to do like 5 years later. It's like, oh man, he wrote a great book about sports science. I want to write a great book about sports science. Oh, he broadened his scope and wrote, more broadly about human performance. I want to do that. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, like, and I guess even less than individual people. I think when I started out, I was reading the New Yorker,
Mm.
and what I found remarkable about the New Yorker is I would look at the table of contents and I would say, man, I'm not interested in any of these articles. None of these topics are interesting to me.
Yeah.
But I had developed, I had learned that if I started the article, I would discover that there was an interesting world there that,
Mm.
you can write about, you know, the, the, the mattress industry. And it's like, whoa, who knew that
Yeah.
there's all these things? And so
Right.
that's that idea of being the world is full of like interesting subcultures and stories,
Mm.
and that you can explore in an in-depth way. That's really that was when I started out. That was maybe the pan. So my dream then was when I started out was someday I would love it if I could write a feature for the New Yorker, and I've never done that. So
Mm.
maybe
Mm.
I've still got some years, so maybe I'll
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I feel like that's just got to keep sending it in or whatever. I mean, there's that.
And you got to
Um,
have something you're still aspiring to. It's like there's
yeah,
nothing more depressing than to, oh, I'm on the
yeah, I've done it
mountaintop.
all.
Yeah,
I'm the
yeah.
Canadian David Epstein now. I can finish.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that
Uh,
wouldn't be so bad.
do you have a New York Times byline? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Me too. Because I wrote a story for The Athletic, and then The Athletic got bought by New York Times. So if you want to read my story about my high school cross country team, St. Mike's, that was published in The Athletic, it's now in the New York Times.
Not to digress, but when did that story come out? I missed that.
Oh, a couple years ago. Like it might have been like pre-COVID, and then that's why, and things blew up. But I'll send it to you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Or I'll look it up because I raced against your high school many times, and
Yeah.
they're a
Yeah.
juggernaut.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was it was fun. It was fun to talk to to people and stuff like, the old coaches. And one of the things that I remember when I went there, and Frank Bergen, who's one of the coaches, I went during school and practice, and he said, "Oh, this is John Frank. He's one of the greats." And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" He's like, "No, like you." And we talked about it, and he's like, it wasn't explicit, and obviously they're not like saying this to the kids at the time, but he's like, we understand the history and we are engaging in myth making. So when you come here, you're one of the greats so that they can aspire to be, like you. And if you look, I mean, if you just look at the numbers, like, yes, like I was on a team that finished second at off, so we didn't win, but whatever, and all this stuff. So it's kind of, yeah, it's kind of its own sort of little subculture, as you're saying,
Yeah, and one that really, like you said, it creates aspiration, and
Mhm.
it's like my kids are elementary school now, and you go to the
Mhm.
gym, and
Mhm.
there's all these banners up on the wall, and
Mhm.
it's like, oh, look, conference quarterfinalists
Mhm.
in the
Yeah.
in badminton or whatever.
Yeah.
But you realize, like, as you wander the halls and you see pictures, like, oh yeah, this is creating an aspiration of like, I want to have a banner someday.
Mhm.
I want to be part of something like this. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's something that good programs and good coaches succeed in instilling.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Like the big thing was the board. I mean, I don't, it's maybe harder to do now, or maybe it's not, but like we just had a physical bulletin board. And every day even more than once a day. Like on the way into school, you'd check the board. What's the workout for today? And then maybe PB, our coach, conveniently, his name is Paul Berry, and so his nickname is PB, would put up, like a story about something or whatever, or like, oh, this is the list of the graduates running in university now, or things like this, and whatever.
Wow.
And so like every day it was just there, and you just sort of see it. So anyway, this is way off topic, but I guess in a way, not like you mentioned about your change and all that, about it's sort of about exploring, and so you want to write books, and you wrote a book about exploring. Um, so I guess like I'm a terrible podcast host in that I have not read your book yet. I've read the other ones, but not this one. So, but I guess like what I wanted to know about this book is, um, it's sort of about like why we should kind of step off the beaten path, try new things, explore. So how would it apply to running? Because running is a fairly sort of traditional thing, and as we said right off the top, right, the basics are pretty basic. Like it's run
Yeah.
more, mostly easy, rest up. So like how does one engage with the explorer gene, so to speak, in running?
Yeah. So I will say, in terms of what the fundamental question in the book is like, is not so much like how should you explore more? It's why do we want to explore? The
Mm,
what is it that draws us to climb mountains or whatever or enter marathons? And it's not I don't think the answers are obvious. Um, but I ended up sort of digging into a bunch of different types of literature research in
mm,
biology and neuroscience. And one area of research is something called the explore exploit dilemma, which
mm,
is like you go to a restaurant, you've been there before, you've had the mash or you've had the burger or whatever, it's pretty good. Do you order the burger again because you know it was pretty good, or do you
mm,
try the special, which might be amazing or might
mm.
be terrible? And we all face
Yeah.
versions of this dilemma all the time, right? And you agonize and you're like, oh crap, you try something different, and then someone else orders your meal, and you spend the whole meal thinking, oh man, I why didn't I order the burger? It looks so much better than this crap I ordered.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one way of framing this idea of like we're constantly facing choices of do you stick with what you know or
Mm,
do you venture into the unknown? And so one of the researchers I interviewed for this, a computational cognitive scientist in Germany,
mm,
named Charlie Wu. I was asking like, so why do we do things like go hiking in the woods or enter a marathon and stuff like that? And he said, well, one of the we're not born knowing what our capabilities are, what the limits of our abilities are.
mm,
So one of the most fundamental questions you can ask is, uh, what am I capable of? Where are my limits? And
mm,
so, in a way, I think the exploring aspect of running is exploring what you can do under a different set of circumstances. But
mm,
running is such that the nature of running is that even if you've been running for a long time, you really don't know how you're going to perform in the next race. Both you
mm,
don't know how fast you're going to run, but you also don't know how deep you're going to dig, how you're going to respond. It's like every time I get to the fourth K of a 5K race,
mm.
it feels like something new and different and
And terrible.
awful. Like yeah, it's you're going through the seventh circle of hell, and you know there's something new about it every time. You
Mm,
just because I've run 55Ks or whatever doesn't mean that this is now familiar territory. So I think there's a certain unknown
mm,
that we get by trying to get close to our limits.
mm,
Now, there are a lot of other explore exploit kind of dimensions to running in terms of whether you run the same route every day or try different things, whether you race the
mm,
same distances, whether you try different terrain. So there's a
mm,
lot there's a lot of like that kind of the superficial aspect of exploration in running like that I
mm,
do think is meaningful in some ways. And I think especially when you talk to like ultra runners or whatever,
mm,
if you're doing some of these big races through the mountains, there's a sense of like exploring new terrain. But there's a mini version of that, anytime I take a turn off my usual routes. But I think the fundamental one, to me, the really fundamental one is trying to understand why we engage in this kind of battle with ourselves in running. Why, and this is specifically like choosing to race, trying to test our limits. I think that is fundamentally a type of exploration that
Mm.
that we're wired to kind of feel rewarded by, to feel meaning from,
Mm.
in a sense.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like I think it's even, say me in my somewhat old age and not really training that much. Like this summer, I managed to train a little bit, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to break 20 for 5K. This is where I'm at right now. And I went and did a park run, so I'd have to pay. And I went out and I could tell probably by about, well, yeah, around that fourth K or so, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna make this under 20 thing, but I was also winning the race. And and I could kind of like tell, I couldn't see, but I could tell that the other person was like close to me. And so I was like, okay, I gotta either win the race or run under 20. But like if I get beat by this guy and I run over 20, that's gonna suck. And so it was really like just so despite the fact that, I'm very far removed from my peak shape or whatever, like in that moment I had to kind of explore, I guess, the pain a little bit. I couldn't, just kind of exploit the usual sort of feeling. I had to give a bit more. And I did end up winning, which was nice. And I ran like 2012, so I didn't run fast enough. And then I talked to the guy, and he was speaking of like, I don't know, exploring and crazy things, he was a Cirque du Soleil acrobat.
Oh my God.
And the park run here is right next to their sort of training ground and dormitory and all this sort of stuff. So he was just like, yeah, I just like to run and come out and just sort of, whatever. And so that was kind of a
That is
fun chat.
impressive. That
Yeah.
a guy who could fold himself into a figure eight can also run a 20-minute
Yeah.
5K.
Well,
But
I
yeah,
mean,
like I think
yeah.
the exploring limits, like there's, one of the distinctions I make in the book is between like absolute and relative exploration. And it's like people think
Mhm.
exploration is you have to be somewhere where no one has been before. And it's like, no,
Mhm.
there's a feeling of exploration in discovering things that are new to yourself. And so similarly, I would say
Mhm.
you and I have both trained hard
Mhm.
in the past.
Mhm.
That doesn't devalue uh, the explorations we do now. And so I can show up to
Mhm.
a race knowing that I have not trained optimally. I'm even
Mhm.
for the age I am now, I'm not
Yeah.
in like my best shape. But it's still it's like this. The question is still, how fast can I run today? Given everything, given the
Mhm.
realities of the world that
Mhm.
I have, this is the
Mhm.
training I've done. This is the condition I'm in. This
Mhm.
is the age I'm at.
Yeah.
Um, how far can I let it hang out today
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
still sort of make it to the finish line in one piece? And the truth is I know that I don't let it hang out as far as I did in the old days. That like yeah, I would finish
Yeah.
races sometimes just being incapacitated for the
Yeah.
rest of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Now
But
I
you
can't
can't do that. Can't do
I
it. You have
can't get
kids,
there.
you know.
Yeah, it's
And
like
yeah, and it's also harder to get there for sure. Yeah, I found there was I don't know what happened. There was a moment when I was having chest pain when I was running, and I was very concerned about this for
yeah.
obviously. And I couldn't figure out what it is. I saw every kind of specialist or whatever, and then finally I saw this one. I guess he's a physio. I don't know. And he figured out that I had like strained a tendon under my rib or something, and so that's what it was. And he fixed it. And so this was a great relief because I didn't have a heart problem.
Yeah.
And also, but I couldn't run hard because not because of the pain, like I could run through the pain, but I was really worried that I was like gonna kill myself, Like I was like,
Yeah.
okay, like so it was that sort of central governor thing, but more conscious even that I was like, okay, like I can't, kind of push. And even I think even after that, even after, kind of was resolved and stuff, like I don't think since then I've ever really been able to get back to a point where I can really lay it out. And like, my training is what it is, so it doesn't matter. But it's just interesting that that moment was like my body was like, hey, like, wait a minute, this is serious. And then it's like, well, actually, it's not serious, but it's still in there.
Yeah, I mean, I found the test for me is like you're racing and you're going as hard as you can. Then you cross
Mhm.
the finish line, and these days for me, like
Mhm.
15 seconds later, I'm like, "Hey, great job, everyone! Yeah, let's get going."
Yeah.
As opposed to being incapacitated, and it's
Yeah.
like, and this was even true. So I mentioned before, like I kind of left running at 28,
Mhm.
and then when I was in my early 30s, I was back
Mhm.
in Toronto training relatively hard. Actually,
Mhm.
I think I was pretty fit.
Mhm.
And I think the big difference was because running wasn't what I cared about most anymore, because
Mhm.
it was now just sort of a recreation. I couldn't get back to that place, and so
Mhm.
I'd get really frustrated because I would finish races disappointed with how fast I'd gone,
Hmm.
or how well I'd placed, but be recovered in 15 seconds. And I'd be like,
Yeah.
why couldn't I go to that place
Yeah.
that would leave me like just
Hmm.
sitting huddled on the ground for hours and hours? And it's like, I don't
Hmm.
know. I don't know. Like
Hmm.
there's something about being young. Maybe there's something about once you've been to the abyss, you don't want to go back. But
Yeah.
there's also something about how much emotion you're willing to devote to that. And it
Hmm.
was just no longer all of my emotion that I was willing to devote.
Yeah, for sure. I remember a line in Thomas Noakes' Thomas Noakes? Yeah, the
Tim
Lore of
Noakes.
Run Tim Noakes. The Lore of Running, very thick book. I remember this line was that he was talking about the marathon, but I think this applies to running in general. He's like, you have to reserve a space for some creative energy when you race. And that
Yeah,
I think that's kind of like you need to have that. It's and you said it's emotional, like it's emotional. There's something, it's not just like, okay, how fit am I, how rested am I, whatever. There's something else.
yeah, and really that what you're saying there is exactly that's the fundamental kind of riddle that I think got me interested in the aspect of the science of running that ended up being leading to my book
Mhm.
Endure, which is like
Mhm.
that running is not just mathematical. You can't just go into the
Mhm.
lab, test a bunch of the VO2 max and lactate threshold
Mhm.
and whatever, and
Mhm.
calculate this is how fast this person's going to race. That there's
Mhm.
always some fudge factor there where you can
Mhm.
test as many people as you want in the lab and then
Mhm.
go have them a race, and you have no idea if they're in the same ballpark. You have no idea who's actually going to
Mhm.
win, and it's
Mhm.
very hard to there's to my knowledge, nobody knows how to measure that.
Mhm.
What you're calling, the creative space or whatever, or the
Mhm.
emotional factor, or
Mhm.
whatever it is. There's something more, and that's what makes. I
Mhm.
mean, without that, running becomes totally uninteresting, right? Like
Mhm.
if you could
Yeah.
just sort of attach a few electrodes, figure out, okay, this guy's the best, this guy's second best, this guy's third best.
Mhm.
What could
Mhm.
be less interesting? Or
Mhm.
even just from a personal sense, if your smartwatch could tell you
Mhm.
this is how fast you are for a marathon, then
Mhm.
it's like, okay, well then I
Don't
don't
need
need
to
to run
run
a
one.
marathon. But if you're like,
Yeah.
that's your estimate, you
Yeah.
stupid watch, but I'm gonna show you. Um,
It's the human element, I guess.
then you've got an interesting question to
Mm.
explore.
Yeah. So, okay, so I think we might have already answered this question. I wasn't quite sure how to ask the question. I feel like in running, a lot of people are very, kind of, as you say, like literal minded, scientific minded, and people love their splits and they're like, okay, if I just run my splits, you know, um, and I guess the question is, have you experienced or found like in your because maybe you don't read physics today, but you read a lot of scientific journals now. Maybe that was all about creating space to read the scientific journals, I think was probably what you were doing there. Um, but like I guess what's going on with those people? I don't know. That's not a nice question. Well, like is it because I'm not one of those people, so I don't have that mindset of like I know what the splits are and everything, but like when I run and when I race, like it's as you say, like I just want to get after it and like just see what I can do. And like to me, like that race that I talked about that I did recently, like that's the best race for me to be in a race because then I don't have to think about splits. If I'm running a race and I'm thinking about splits, it's stressing me out. Like I don't really want that. Like I want to just, kind of be in the jungle and like run.
Yeah.
Um, like what is it? And I don't maybe this is out of your scope. Like is it like a personality thing? Like some people and there's just a lot of them that like to run and yeah, and like you already kind of answered this, but like is science looking at this? Maybe I need to read your book. Like trying to figure out what what this gap is between like the numbers and reality. And I guess okay, wait. I'm trying to think. I think you answered this already, but I guess my question is like how do those people feel when they're in that emotional moment of the race, having kind of relied upon the numbers and a more kind of scientific kind of lead up, but then you get to this point where like the floor opens up on you probably. I don't know. Like I don't know if you get what I'm saying. I'm trying to come up.
Yeah. Well, look, there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
Let me say this. A couple things you brought up. First of all, I do think running by its nature attracts people with a certain type of personality that loves numbers, and I'm
Hmm.
one of them. And so in the 90s, when data was
Mm,
scarce,
mm,
I read in Tim Noakes's book that one way of predicting overtraining is you take your resting heart rate when you wake up in the morning, then you get up, and 15 seconds later you take
yeah,
your resting heart rate again, and
yeah.
you plot the graph between those two things. So I would plot in Lotus 1, 2, 3 the running graph of my gap between resting and standing heart rate. I would
Yeah.
plot the running 4-week average of my mileage and how many miles I'd put in each shoe and so on. And I loved that because it gave a sort of concreteness. So there was something very quantifiable about running, and
Mm,
the fact that running is quantifiable attracts people who love
mm.
quantifying things.
It is very attractive for sure.
Yeah, and it's too, to me, it's too attractive, and so that's why I
Mm,
don't run with a smartwatch. I don't have a
mm,
GPS. I run with my Timex Ironman watch
mm,
because to me, I recognize that it's a little too attractive to me, and I will the measurement will become the goal. Instead of the
mm,
measurement helping me towards the goal, I'll be like, what was my average pace this week? Do I need to go a little
mm,
faster? Did I reach this arbitrary round number of mileage that I set out for myself, or what is the trend of blah blah blah? And so
mm,
the cart starts to drive the horse. Um, some people are able to manage that better than others.
mm.
Some people think they're managing it better than others, but they're not.
Yeah.
Some people want different things out of running.
Mm,
That they're getting what they want out of quantifying, out of Strava or whatever. And that's so, like
mm,
everyone's free to want what they want out of running.
mm,
I think you're right though that at a certain point, if you are entering races and trying to push your limits, um, you reach a point in a race where the numbers become meaningless.
mm,
And and so then the question is, do you keep looking at the numbers and imagining that they're telling you what you need to know, or do you look somewhere else?
mm,
And I think I like to think that if people race enough and if they race hard enough and they care enough, that they come to that they will come to the understanding that they have to look beyond the numbers
mm,
in that crucial part of the race. But I also think, look, there's lots of people who um, for whom races are maybe not all that different from workouts. So
mm,
they know that in a workout that they're assigned to run a certain distance at a certain pace with certain splits, and they go and hit those splits. And then in a race, their coach or their algorithm predicts that they should be able to run this pace at those splits, and they go do it. Um, and so for those people, I I I would hope for them that someone or some experience teaches them that there may be something more there that you
yeah.
shouldn't.
Well, that's it. That sounds like the not, not that the exploit rather than the explorer.
Yeah, you're doing what you already know you're capable of. You've done the
Yeah.
workouts. It proves to you you can run that time. You go run that time. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, and look, if I have a regret about my running career,
Mm,
it's that I was quite a cautious, numbers driven guy.
mm,
And so I very rarely let it hang out. And
mhm.
so, I was a 1500-meter runner. I, in all my career, I never positive splitted a race. Like I
Okay.
never really blew up because I was too
Yeah.
cautious. And so I wish that I had absolutely, hit the fan and
Yeah.
gotten and blown out a few times because only then would I be confident that I'd
Mhm.
actually been racing close enough to my razor's edge.
Mm. Yeah. I think that's a good answer to my non-question. I think like what I'm trying to figure out as a coach is, different athletes that I coach are, have different sort of tendencies. And so it's kind of like, it's not that hard to recognize the tendencies, but then it's kind of like, okay, how do you give them a bit of what they are not? Because
Yeah,
I
exactly. I
think
think I think you have to respect who
yeah,
people are and what makes them tick. But
yeah,
it's like I remember talking to Brad Young, who's one of
mm,
my former teammates at McGill, who then is now
yeah.
a sports
Talk,
psychology
talk to Brad all the time.
prof.
We did a webinar for AC recently, so yeah,
There you go. He's a,
yeah.
he's a thoughtful guy. He's working, he's moved more into like actually working with athletes. But I
Hmm.
remember like 20 years ago when he was first starting out, he was interested in the idea of like maybe we shouldn't give splits in workouts all the time. Maybe we shouldn't be like having people check every
Yeah,
400 meters. And as a guy
yeah.
when I was leading an interval, I'd be checking every 100
And
meters.
you had a panic attack during the conversation with him.
Yeah, yeah, I was pathological, but I loved, he was saying like, okay, it's
Yeah.
not that we stop giving feedback at all or just let people run. It's like
Mhm.
maybe the coach has a signal to tell you whether you're too fast or too slow, or has a signal to tell you whether you're within 1 second or 2 seconds or 5 seconds of your proposed
Yeah.
split, and you can adjust.
Yeah.
But you're not, and it's developing your idea, your ability to feel the pace.
Hmm.
And I thought that was a great idea. And I think the reason it resonated with me is because it was because I was so dialed into, like I
Hmm.
ran with people, not not all the people I ran with were checking their splits every 100 meters. It's me who was bringing that. And so,
Hmm.
and I had a coach, and John, I
Hmm.
know whenever I write about something super esoteric about like the Michel Foucault's influence on endurance coaching, I know it's
Yeah.
like if there's one person in the world who will read this, John LaFranco will read it. Thank God.
Yeah.
Because but that what that made me think of is a coach that I had who noticed that I was overly dependent on my watch, and he would literally yell at me in the middle of mile reps and make me tear off my watch and throw it in
Yeah.
the infield,
Wow.
which stressed the hell out of me, especially when I discovered I was injured later. I
Yeah.
remember I missed a workout, so I was just watching the workout,
Hmm.
so he's like, "I'll take the splits." And then I noticed people are starting, he's missing the start, and then he's just making up numbers as they go by. It's like
Yeah.
the group's going through like on a really hard mile rep. They go through the first lap, and he's like, 63, perfect, keep going. I'm like, you have no idea. They might have been running like 58 or they might have been running 70.
Yeah.
So anyway, all of which is to say, he gave me a little bit of what I didn't want, but what I needed.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really like to
That
the
was
extent you
Centrowitz,
can do
right?
that. Yeah, that was Matt
Centrowitz.
Centrowitz, who was
Okay.
quite a character in many ways, but a
Yeah.
very intuitive coach. And
Yeah.
and he was the opposite of me. And so he gave me a little bit of what I probably
Hmm.
could have used 10 years earlier when I was a younger runner and sort of formulating my neuroses.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
to the extent you can do that, you don't have to make people change who they are, but
Hmm.
just pull them out of their comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah.
Make everyone take their watches off
Hmm.
for an interval or whatever, or
Yeah.
turn them to the inside. Get challenge, but make it a game. Like this is what Brad was
Hmm.
suggesting. It's like it becomes a game. Like how
Hmm.
close can you come to 64s if we ask you to run 64s?
Hmm.
And then don't feel like the workout doesn't depend on, oh, I screwed up and went too slow. It's like it's a game. How
Hmm.
close can I throw the dart to
Yeah.
the bullseye?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I think coaches need to provide a lot of context about the purpose of workouts, which sometimes doesn't happen. And then that lets the athletes kind of get carried away and sometimes in the wrong direction, especially if you're an athlete who really is into splits. Like, so if, yeah, like if the workout is whatever, like 10 400s to 1500 pace, then in your head, you're doing the math, you're automatically like, okay, I have to run whatever 60s if I want to run 345. But the coach, you know, might have a different idea of like what it's supposed to be. And, like if it's windy or cold or hot or, like all these things. And so you're like, well, okay, maybe it's not 60, maybe it's like 59 to 62, right? Like it could be any of those things. And
Yeah.
it's okay. Like it's okay to, but yeah, but you're right though that you have to meet people where they are. Cause like sometimes that's gonna on any given day, like that could just stress someone out and actually they might not get what they want out of the workout. So you have to pick your spots when you're challenging them that way. But it's
Yeah,
definitely a good
and
tool.
everyone has different superpowers. So people who are
Hmm.
really locked into splits, that they're going
Hmm.
to be really good at hitting their
Hmm.
splits in a race. And you don't want to
Yeah.
take that away from them. But
Hmm.
like another example is for me doing workouts, one of the sort of automatic obsessions is like, okay, once I hit a time, no subsequent intervals are going to be slower than that
Slower.
interval. So it
Right.
always has to be equal or faster, and that becomes a real trap because that
Mm.
then that predisposes me to sandbag the first few intervals so that I don't set a standard that I can't hit. So
Yeah.
sometimes I've done workouts where it's like someone that for whatever reason the coach would be like, okay, the seventh interval you're just going to go really fast, and I'll be
Hmm.
like, all right, cool. So then now the pattern's broken, and
Hmm.
I'm sort of released from my own kind of desire
Yeah.
for patterns. And so
Hmm.
ways of
Yeah.
doing that, or just mixed workouts, I always find
Hmm.
those are helpful ways where it's like different lengths or it's different, you're going off the track for a 1 mile tempo between intervals. Those
Hmm.
were ways that helped me get out of the, the focus on like, when I write this in my log, I want it to look like a work of art,
Yeah. Yeah. For
which is a
sure.
dangerous mindset.
Okay, I got a couple more questions. The first question kind of goes back to your first book, which is which comes first, cardio or weights? And that's a question that does not seem to be, despite the fact that you wrote a whole book on it, does not seem to be resolved. And I guess you wrote something recently about this, and I thought of it because I was at a conference or whatever, and the the information they were giving at the conference did not include the information that you had shared in your article. So I was like, wait, there's something new here. Like, what? So can you share what's the update here? Like, what is going on in
Yeah,
like
this is
cardio
a
versus weights?
let me tell you, writing a book with the title "Which Comes First, Cardio or Weights" is an invitation for everyone to ask you what the answer to that question is. And when your answer is like, it kind of
Uh,
depends, it's like
it,
it's a great way of deflating
People don't like
interviews.
that.
But
Yeah.
um, so maybe a little, if not to belabor the point, but a little background. Like
Hmm.
15 years ago, when I wrote that book, there was a bunch of new molecular signaling research, which was, and the idea was strength training sends one set of signals, endurance training sends a different set of signals in terms of how the muscles should adapt, and those
Hmm.
signals interfere with each other. So if you've got the
Hmm.
strength training signals turned on, then you're going to get less out of an endurance workout, and vice
Hmm.
versa. So you should keep those things separate. Or at least if you're doing joint like both at the same on the same back to back, you should do whichever one you care about first because that's going to
Hmm.
be get more out of it. Subsequently, that it sort of turned out that 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 research was maybe oversimplified or overinterpreted. That it's like it's
Hmm.
not really that big effect of an
Hmm.
effect. It's maybe that's not the key thing. And what really matters is are you fueled enough? That the
Hmm.
reason the second workout is less effective is that your muscles are partly depleted. So you can get away with doing both strength and endurance training, but you really, really, especially before before strength training rather, have to make sure that you've refueled your muscles are restocked and you've
Hmm.
got not just enough protein but enough carbohydrate if you've gone for a run before that. So that's where I think the state of the art is. What I wrote about recently was actually it was sort of an opinion paper by some scientists saying we've looked too narrowly at
Hmm.
at these molecular signaling pathways that, oh, we're worried about is this particular AMPK pathway activated, it does
Hmm.
strength interfere with that or whatever. And what they were arguing is that actually there's a lot more commonalities between strength and endurance training than people have appreciated. So,
Hmm.
for example, if you do like if you want to be good at endurance, you need to have muscles with lots of mitochondria in them, because that's what's going to allow you to sustain aerobic metabolism. It's like, well, if you do strength training and make your muscles bigger, you're going to have room for more muscles with more mitochondria. And conversely, like
Hmm.
having more mitochondria, it it gives you more. And I'm probably butchering the biochemistry here because it's not my forte, but basically having more mitochondria is going to help your muscles respond to strength training better too. And so there's these overlapping ideas where actually, so if you look at on a broad population level,
Hmm. Hmm.
people who have good endurance tend to have better strength, and people who have better strength tend to have better endurance. That actually these two things go together. It's not that. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, if one were to look at me, you'd say,
Hmm.
man, that guy is super, super skinny. He's obviously been doing way too much endurance training and not enough strength training. But
Hmm.
if you were to measure my strength, and compare it to the general population, I'd like to think, and this, I don't know if my nose is going to grow 2 inches here, but I'd like to think that they would say, actually, Alex is a pretty strong guy relative to the
Yeah.
general population. That all this training I've been doing has set me up to be relatively strong.
Yeah.
So anyway, all of which is to say, I think the philosophical take is that we should not get carried away with worrying about interference between those two things.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
actually strength and endurance go hand in hand, and they're not enemies. And runners shouldn't be worried about, oh no, I'm going to have massive biceps and it's going to make me slower. This is not a thing you should worry about. From a
No.
practical perspective, the thing I would say is refueling, and
Yeah. Okay.
ideally, if you want to build muscle, maybe give it some space and some rest so you have time to refuel after a long run, just to
Hmm.
get the most out of that out of that strength workout.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good to hear. That is more common sense than the. I think so. I think a couple things on this. Like my initial take was always like, yeah, like for sure if you're, an elite runner and you're really like, it's like a fine line and like you're kind of worried about you're really like calculating the effect of each workout and that kind of thing. Then yeah, you might want to take that into account, like the whole interference thing and separate it out. But like, if I'm coaching high school kids or I'm coaching even university kids or I'm coaching recreational adults, like to me, like anything is good. Like if they're not doing strength training and then they are, this is like 1,000% improvement. Like maybe not a thousand,
Yeah.
but you know what I
So,
mean?
so
Like doing nothing versus doing something, something is way better than nothing. And so if you can only do it like in the morning before your run and you don't have any other choice, like do it. Don't not do it because you're worried about interference. That was kind
Yeah,
of
so
always
look,
my take
I'll
on
tell
it.
you where the rubber hits the road for me. Like, so
Mm.
I've written a billion articles. I've written the book with that title. Uh, what do I do? I do strength training twice a week, and I do it right after a run, which
Yeah,
is super suboptimal. But like to your point, it's like if I do these workouts, I'm going to get something out of it. If I don't do them, I'm going to get nothing out of it. And the time
exactly.
that's convenient and worthwhile for me, it just happens to be it's like I don't
Hmm.
like, I get up and I go for a run with my wife and then I'm back. I have a little time. I'm going to do my strength workout. Now is what
Yeah.
I'm going to do. Yeah, I'm going to eat a banana before and
Hmm.
I'm going to, take a few steps to try and be fueled for the strength workout.
Hmm.
But even though it might be 10% more optimal if I waited an hour, it's like I don't have an hour to sit around here
No,
just to be like 10% more
you're not a
optimal.
pro
I'm
athlete
doing the workout
anymore.
whenever is most convenient for me. And
Yeah,
that I think is for 99.99% of us, that's the rule to follow.
for sure. Okay, last question. You wrote about this as well, but I want to talk about it a bit because I'm sort of involved. What's your take on the McGill track situation?
Yeah. So I guess for listeners who aren't familiar with it,
Yeah,
Miguel cut its track team,
yeah,
along with whatever 24 other
yeah,
varsity programs.
yeah.
Um, I mean, I'm opposed. That's my
Okay,
take.
yeah.
It's there. So people have lots of different perspectives on how sports should fit into our society and what their value is, and connected to that, how much money we should spend on them, right? Like this is also in the context of government support for sport too, right?
Mhm,
Like, well, why should we be spending millions on Olympic sports? And I
mhm,
am actually not as gung ho as you might think, saying that, we need to spend tens of millions of dollars winning Olympic medals. I'm like, I
mhm,
like Olympic medals, and I'm happy. I'm
mhm,
certainly happy to. I personally am happy for my tax dollars to go towards Olympic medals.
mhm,
But I can understand why some people might say, screw that. Like, what's that doing for society? That we don't need that. So when
mhm,
McGill says to bring it to the point, when McGill says, yeah, we effectively, I guess what they're saying is we can't afford to support McGill track. They're dressing it up
mhm.
in different
Yeah.
uh, guises, but I think it's probably about money. Like, I have sympathy for that. I know that McGill is under a ton of pressure right now,
Mhm.
even if the athletic department is nominally sort of self-supporting.
Yeah.
But to me, and this is what I wrote about in my Globe op-ed, is like, to me, the opportunity to participate is far more important than optimizing the participation or optimizing the competitive outcomes. It's like,
Mm,
would I rather have a team where that competes locally in the Quebec conference, competes at
mhm,
Laval and Sherbrooke and McGill, and maybe heads over to Queens,
mhm,
and qualifies a few people for nationals and occasionally wins a medal? Or would I rather have a team, well, would I rather have no team? Of course not. Or
mhm,
even would I rather have a team that's heavily funded, but we're only funding teams if they
mhm,
can be the best and have really nice warm-ups and fly
mhm,
down to Boston to chase fast times.
mhm,
And my personal view is give people the opportunity to compete, and we could do it.
mhm,
Like we can bill it ourselves when we're traveling. We can be sort of we can find a way to
mhm,
to to compete with with whatever resources we can get.
mhm.
So anyway, that's probably my top line take. I don't know what your view is.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying there. I think though that, in your article you talked about, kind of the sort of student run model in the UK and just sort of how McGill was when you were there, or just before, I guess, just kind of a little bit more kind of
Self-funded,
bootstrapping
essentially.
things
Yeah,
and
yeah.
self-funded. Like, I get the sense that McGill doesn't want that because it doesn't look good.
I,
Like
I,
it's
I
kind of
agree.
like
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think they want McGill students to be telling stories about staying on people's couches. I think they want McGill students to be, kind of having the best of the best. But I think that that's misguided because, as you say, those are amazing experiences and they're valuable. And I get like, things have changed a little bit in terms of, safe sport and stuff like that. And I think I would agree that the university should not have people staying on people's couches. But I think that there is a middle ground still. And like, I mean, I look at so my former team that I used to coach, Concordia, now coached by a couple friends of mine, Justin and Taylor, and like, yeah, it's 100% self-funded. They just finished a fundraising sort of push and they raised $20,000.
Wow.
In my last 3 years there, I managed to raise like 10, 11 each year. And that was with the purpose of then opening a track team because we only had cross country, so we kind of had to raise some seed money to like be able to have a track team. And now they have a track team, and now they're continuing and pushing. So it's going well, and and there's no indication from Concordia. And I think the coach asked the AD point blank, like, "When we go cut the track, are we safe?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're self-funded. It's fine." So it should be able to work, right? And there's a track there. And so that's part of it, I think, is they want to, monetize the track and have recreation programs and things like this. But again, like lots of universities don't have tracks and they manage. So it sounds like it's more a question of will than a question of money because the money can be figured, you know?
Yeah, well, but I think actually you put your finger on it with this idea that they don't want to look that they have a certain idea of how it should look. And the two things I want
Hmm.
to say is one is um, the argument that I made may read as a sort of devalorization of the importance of coaching and stuff, and it's not that. And
Hmm.
if you actually look at I checked in like what's the status of Cambridge these days, and it's these days they actually raise money and they have a coach. But the students hire the coach, and the coach
Sure.
doesn't have like autocratic control. You can compete. You
Hmm.
don't have to train with the coach, but there's a coach
Hmm.
available, and so they
Yeah.
recognize the role of like having someone who knows what they're doing leading the program, and that gives also
Hmm.
some continuity
Hmm.
as students turn over, is to have someone who's been there for a while.
Yeah.
But I think and I didn't want to be too like pointed on or too like vicious in writing this op-ed, but
Yeah.
I also have a point about sports bureaucracy, and that
Hmm.
I think this came into play with Own the Podium too when the Canadian when Canada finally put some money towards funding the Olympic programs. Then they set up these rubrics for which sports would get funded, and there were things like, oh well, what percentage of your team at the last Olympics medaled? And
Hmm.
so as soon as you make that a funding rubric, then the teams are like, oh, okay, we need to stop sending people who are only ranked 10th
Non-medalists.
because then they're not
Yeah.
going to medal and they're going to hurt our funding. And it's like, oh, this is understandable, but now the bureaucracy is functioning in a way to try and ensure its own self-preservation instead of
Mm.
to ensure the preservation of its mission. So it's saying what will enable us to continue to do our jobs, and it's understandable.
Mm.
It's the same thing in like my kids are in youth soccer right now, and
Hmm.
the club we're with just went from like you could register for summer or winter or both
Hmm.
to now you have to register year round. Well, why do you have to register year round? Because people's livings depend on being able to like pay their rent
Hmm.
in the winter as well as the summer.
Hmm.
So, and all of it just say, I think McGill Athletics, I think there's a little bit of that too. That's like we have people, our job is to have professional communications, to order really good uniforms, to have proper strength and conditioning, to have physiotherapy, to have all these things. So
Hmm.
we can only have teams that fit into this bill. And it's like, so you're saying that if we can't provide the Cadillac, then we're just not going to have we're just going to cut the team entirely. And I think that
Hmm.
is allowing the administrative vision of McGill Athletics to come ahead of like, what would the students want? Like,
Hmm.
would they want all the fancy stuff? Of course they do. But
Hmm.
would they more importantly want the opportunity to compete? I
Hmm.
think yes, even if
Yeah,
that means they're going door to door selling chocolates like we did
for
when I
sure.
arrived at McGill.
Yeah. And there's I mean there's so many examples of teams that started out self-funded and turned into national champions, you know? I mean, like Laval, I don't know if it's self-funded, but Laval was a pretty small program.
Yeah.
And then, now it's not. Now it's the key program in Quebec. And same, you got Guelph and a bit of history there, but like even, like Victoria is another example of a program they don't have a full track team. They have cross country and they do track, but they just do distance and stuff, and they make it happen, you
Yeah,
know.
there's lots of models. And the commonality in a lot of those programs you just mentioned is there was someone very passionate who
Hmm.
worked within the university, but also outside the university, had a club
Yeah.
program that then helps helps defray expenses and bring in some
Hmm.
revenue and stuff. So,
Hmm.
like, yeah, there's lots of ways of doing this. It's just to just cut the team
Hmm.
without even asking, like, what are other ways we could do this? Um, I think it is about money, but it doesn't have
Hmm.
to be because it does, the ways could be found that would not cost McGill Athletics,
Yeah.
other than um, having to, accept different models that don't fit into their like, this is how we do it model.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people working on it. Hopefully, Derek Covington is kind of leading the charge, and he's trying to get some meetings and stuff. So hopefully, there's going to be some movement, and yeah, like it seems like there's potential for a solution, but
I really hope
time
so.
will
I mean,
tell.
there's certainly enough energy to carry a program. Obviously, it's hard to carry that energy over a long period of time, but I don't have any doubt that it could be done. It's just a question of whether McGill's willing um,
Mhm.
to to listen.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. All right. Well, we'll end there before we get into kind of the Rickroll Joe Rogan territory time wise. But really appreciate you coming and like yeah, as you said at the beginning, we always have really good talks about stuff. I don't know, we could probably do a couple more hours, but this is probably all the attention span people have for the two of us here.
People need to go out and go for the runs, or if they've been
E-
out running, they need to finish the runs. So
Exactly,
one way or another. But
exactly.
yeah, no, this is
So
fun, John. I appreciate you having me on. It's always an interesting journey to see where we end up, what we end up talking about.
definitely. All right. Thanks, Alex.